except I'm not on there.
Good evening. Welcome to the Lebanon City of Lebanon Plan Commission meeting on July 18th, 2022. Opening, I'll call the meeting to order. And roll call, Matt.
John Lastly. Here. Dan Bashore. Absent. Kevin Krulik. Here. Keith Campbell.
Here.
Ashley Paddock.
Here.
Brian Tandy. Here. Allie Mullen.
Here.
Lori Gross.
Here.
Okay. And then motion for approval of the minutes. Everyone had a chance to read them?
Make a motion, we approve the minutes.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Roll call, please.
John Lastly.
Yes.
Kevin Krulik.
Yes.
Keith Campbell.
Yes.
Ashley Paddock.
Yes.
Brian Tandy.
Yes.
Allie Mullen.
Yes.
Lori Gross.
Yes.
Okay, I don't know if there's anyone here this evening for these three items, 2246, 2247, and 2248. That will be in August. Isn't that correct, Ben?
Correct, yes, and the items related to the Scott Barrett projects, those have all been continued to August.
Okay. So the first item of business is docket number 2245, CCL Properties requesting development plan approval to construct a new warehouse building. The property is located at 640 Ransdell Road. The property is zoned ID General Industrial and in the Interstate Overlay District. Ben?
Thank you, Mr. Campbell. Give you a little bit of an overview of this property here. If they want to pull up the screen, this is the property on Ransdell Road. It was previously owned by Gabriel Metals for a recycling center. So this gives you a little bit of an idea what the existing conditions were on the property when the applicant purchased it fairly recently. So this all needed to be cleaned up first before they could do anything with the property. And this gives you a little bit better idea what the proposed conditions, so they've certainly cleaned everything up. They're going to have to regrade the detention facility that's here to the west side of the property, and they're looking to build a new building here and add a little bit of additional pavement, and then actually return quite a bit of this area to turf that you can see in this area. That's what this area is here. So they're actually going to be adding quite a bit of turf to this property that's not there now, in addition to adding that new building. So that gives you just a real quick history on the site. Again, I mentioned that they're looking to build this new building because of the size of the building. It did require development plan approval. They had a number of variances that they needed to seek in order to be able to build the building that you see proposed here. And those 5 variances were approved at the Board of Zoning Appeals meeting on July 5th, and they were for building materials, corridor buffer setback, building orientation, parking area curbing, and parking lot perimeter landscaping. And again, I mentioned, there was a 6th one, parking lot interior landscaping, and those were approved at the July 5th meeting. So for you here tonight then is the development plan application where we review to ensure that they've met all the applicable development standards associated with the property. Again, just quickly running through, this is about a little under 5,000 square foot building, and they had proposing some additional landscaping along the interstate side. I don't know if you've driven past here on the interstate, there's a mound and a fence along the interstate such that you can't even see into the property from the interstate. So this building, you may be able to see parts of the roof, but you won't even be able to see the rest of the building. Then with the addition of the landscaping they're proposing, that will provide some additional vertical screening as well. So it's very difficult actually seeing this property with the privacy fence, so that there's quite a bit of screening along the interstate already. In terms of development standards, they have met all the applicable development standards for the site when considering the variances that I just previously discussed. They are not proposing any additional lighting on the site. If they decide to add lighting in the future, they would be required to submit to us a lighting plan so we can ensure that everything they're proposing meets all the applicable development standards. Not currently proposing that. In terms of landscaping, again, as I mentioned, they are providing that additional landscape buffer along the interstate that you see here in the image. Signage, at this time, they haven't proposed any additional signage on the site. Again, if they were to propose any signage in the future, they would need to submit that signage plan to our office to make sure that that meets all the applicable standards. In terms of architecture review, this is a metal building. He's going to mention they get a variance for materials. I believe I've got just a quick image in here. Just gives you a little idea. There is some variation on color, but this is a picture of what the material looks like that they'd be using to construct that facility. Otherwise, other than the variance that was approved, they do meet all applicable standards for architecture and design as well. So that's just a real quick overview of the development plan application. In review then, staff has recommended approval of the subject development plan on the following conditions: that the applicant adequately address any remaining TAC comments, and then if applicable on lighting and signage, they would submit lighting and or signage plans that meet all UDO standards. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, any other questions from the board? Seeing none, okay, would the applicant come forward, please?
Paul Ashert, Monument Engineering. I'm the engineer on the plans and also helped Bob walk through all the processes here. Bob leads facilities for Fitzmark. They're a transportation company in Indianapolis that's done a lot of growth, and they have bought a portalet company that they are relocating from Brownsburg, I believe, and purchased this property and have really invested a lot into turning what was basically a junkyard into a nice parcel, and I think you see the intent with the rendering. And the site already had detention on it, so we're making some modifications to make sure that it fits into the current standards, and I know we are ironing out some final comments, but I think we're pretty close. And so we would respectfully request your approval of this project, and they hope to get it done this year. So I think that's pretty much it, if you all have any questions.
Anyone on the board have questions for the applicant? No, I have one question. It looks like you've done a great job cleaning that mess up.
Yeah,
And I mean, that's what it was.
it was, yeah, so
So
that's
is
all
there
Bob.
anything that you find that we didn't know about down in the ground?
They did have their environmental phase 1 and phase 2, so I know they followed all the proper procedures with the cleanup there.
Okay, so we got passed through that, right?
Yes.
Okay. Good enough for me then. Any other questions? Okay. Anyone from the audience who would like to speak? Don't see anyone, so we will have a motion to, I want to open it and close the hearing. Thank you. Okay, I'd entertain a motion for this 2245.
I'll make a motion to approve the subject development plan contingent on the applicant addressing any ongoing TAC comments and submitting a lighting plan and a signage plan if needed.
I'll second.
Okay. Okay, want to go call the roll, please?
John Lashley,
Yes.
Dan Bashore,
Yes.
Kevin Krulik,
Yes.
Keith Campbell,
Yes.
Ashley Paddock,
Yes.
Ryan Tandy,
Yes.
Ali Mullen,
Yes.
Lori Gross.
Yes.
Okay, motion carries. Congratulations. Okay, thank you. Ben, you ready for the next item? This is 2248. No, I'm sorry, docket 2250. Auburn Meadows LLC requesting a 5-year extension of their primary plat approval for Auburn Meadows subdivision.
Thank you, Mr. Campbell. I will pull up just a quick image of the original primary plat so we can see that. So it just gives you an idea of the status of the development. They've got 3 sections that have been platted that are shown in white. What is shaded here in kind of this tan color is what's left or remaining on that primary plat that was approved back in 2004 that is yet to be recorded. There's about a little over 110 lots. I think it's 114 lots total remaining to be recorded and developed with these remaining sections. I'll let the applicant talk to you about what they're thinking in terms of how many sections that might represent, but it likely would be multiple sections in terms of recording what is left and developing out what is left. In terms of the standard, the reason this before you tonight for a primary plat extension request, in the Unified Development Ordinance, Chapter 9, it indicates that the approval of an overall primary plat shall be effective for a period of 12 months unless upon request of the applicant, the commission grants an extension of time. The reason we're bringing this for you here tonight is it's not particularly clear what that 12-month time period represents. In terms of a multi-section development like this, we certainly would not expect multiple phases to be recorded, a secondary plat within a 12-month time period. So it's not clear here whether this means that the first section needs to be recorded within 12 months or whether all sections need to be recorded in 12 months. So because it wasn't clear to us what exactly was intended by that 12-month time period, we decided it just made most sense just to go ahead and bring this to the Planning Commission for approval and an extension of time. So they have asked for an extension of 5 years. So that leads me to believe that this will be multiple sections to develop out to finish this out. And certainly, I expect that they may be successful and it won't take 5 years to develop the rest of this out. But we all know this was approved in 2004, what happened in 2008 that delayed it this far in the first place. So I'm sure that they're looking for just a little bit of extra time just to make sure, just in case something happens in the market, that they can finish this out. I will tell you, this is a standard. We're in our process of updating the UDO. We're going to clarify this in terms of what that 12-month time period means for a multi-section development like this, where we don't anticipate that all sections will be recorded within 12 months. So we will be clarifying that, but in the meantime, when we have developments like this that are obviously going beyond the 12-month time period and aren't recording the entire development, we'll just go ahead and bring them here for a request for extension of time until we get that UDO section cleared up and the next round of UDO updates that we're doing over the course of the next 6 to 9 months. Just one thing to clarify, the primary plat approval process, the extension request that they're asking for tonight is a separate, distinct, and unique process from construction plans and secondary platting process. The recording of the sections, the construction plans are a separate process from this. So they will be required to submit secondary plats and construction plans that meet all applicable standards, current standards of the Unified Development Ordinance, and all that recording process happens separately. There is nothing that's recorded as part of the primary platting process. So that is a separate approval process that would take place on its own individual timeline. So with that, planning staff does recommend that the Planning Commission approve a 5-year extension of the primary plat approval for Auburn Meadows, and I'd be happy to answer any questions if there are any.
Okay. Any questions from the board?
I got a couple. So, correct me if I'm wrong, Ben, but the previous administration did the same thing, correct, in regards to giving kind of I would say, a blanket request, if you will, for this addition in the beginning, correct?
What do you mean by a blanket request?
Well, there was no, each year they didn't really have to go back and look at the different sections and so forth. It was just pretty much, yes, you can do what we originally talked about.
So my understanding is there are a set of construction plans that were quote unquote approved for the overall development in 2004. And then they had sections that were recorded in 2005, 2016 that were, I believe, were based on those original construction plans. The last round of approvals in 2020 that we did, they did have to update those construction plans to current standards. And I believe Kevin, fill in the blanks here, but I believe we're asking them to actually redraw and update those construction drawings with the next section.
Yeah, in 2020, we allowed them to do an abbreviated update to the plans, add in some additional details or reference the current city standards. There were also some essentially red lines of the approved construction plans to update a couple of the standards. At this point, though, with updating the primary plat, we'd like to see any future section completely redrawn in terms of construction plans and platting, because we did have some difficulties, with this 2020 section and the markups, the sort of piecing back together a set of plans was hard to read, hard to enforce in the field, created some problems. Some things had to be reconstructed after they were put into the ground incorrectly. So we want to avoid that the next time, so we're going to require a full redesign of any future sections.
And I guess what's the disadvantage been in the sense of coming back every 12 months like we normally do?
Well, the disadvantage is when you have multiple section developments like this, we know that they're not going to record all of those sections within 12 months, so we're continuing to come back. The primary plat is not, again, it's a separate process from construction plans and secondary platting. So the primary plat, essentially what you see on the screen, it sets the road layout and the lot layout. That's not going to change regardless of whether we approve an extension or not. So it's more of just an administrative function at that point. Frankly, we could even just make it an actual administrative function. It doesn't have to come back for a public hearing. But that's the disadvantage of the way it's written now, is multi-section developments will always have to come back and request an extension. And in fact, the way the process goes now, a lot of them will get their construction plans for that first section approved. They will construct that section, and they won't record that first section until after construction is complete and all the utilities have been accepted by the city. A lot of times it's close to 12 months before they might even record the first section, much less the future sections. So we just need to clarify, does it remain 12 months and become 18 months? What does that mean? If they record the first section within 12 months, are they okay to continue? But again, just the point that we made now is that there's no blanket approval on construction plans. Any future sections will have to meet the standards of the time, and construction plans will be written for each section and drawn for each section based on the standards. If we update them again in 3 years, any sections that are approved after that would have to meet those standards.
So if we go ahead and approve this isn't something that the city can't stop if there's issues, or, put a hold on construction if there's problems?
Yeah, that is a totally separate process from this extension. Yeah, we would have every ability to make sure construction plans are prepared accordingly. If there's any issues, we can address those at the time.
Any other questions?
I do have one.
Okay.
We dealt with this a while back, but we didn't have with Angelia Gardens. There going to be any issues with the way things are platted right now, with the way that they're going to have to connect?
Any issues?
Because
So the primary plat will establish the locations of roads and easements, but those won't be recorded until there's a secondary plat.
but
And again, as I mentioned, the secondary plat is a totally separate process from what we're talking about tonight.
it looks like from the primary plat already, it almost looks like the lift station sits there in one of the properties, doesn't it? It's pretty close.
It's in the area of that stub street that goes out to the east.
Okay. Couldn't tell from just by looking and saying that's close to being in one of the lots, or it's on the edge. So.
And the secondary plats may move lot lines a little bit here and there, and road layouts a little bit here and there, but it will generally follow the layout from the primary plat. But yeah, that lift station is somewhere in the vicinity of that stub street that heads out to that eastern property line.
Is there big communication between both the developers about that?
You'd have to ask them. That's a private property to private property discussion. We haven't been involved in that.
Okay, any other questions from the board? Okay, would the applicant step forward?
I'm Bill Tully with Auburn Meadows. I apologize, my hearing is horrible, wearing these hearing aids and still can't hear. But anyway, when we came to the commission in 2016, and we asked for a 6 to 10 year extension at that time, and you gave us a 6-year and told us that if we needed more, that would be granted probably at a later date. And at that point in time, we hoped to be done by that time. But of course, we got held up way back in '08, as what you all know, what we went through at that point in time. And development, of course, this is quite a large development. It's the largest development in the city of Lebanon, 272 homes, complete total. And the last couple of years, we've made substantial progress, but it took quite a while to get out of that hole of 2008. We don't anticipate that it will take the additional 5 years to finish this. In fact, until just recently with this somewhat downturn in the economy that we've got going on right now, we thought we pretty well had a plan put together with a couple of builders to do the balance of the 114 lots and get that completed here within the next probably 2 years. Seems right now the biggest thing is a hold up on some materials aren't even available. We're going to have to talk with probably Kevin and Ben about what alternatives if we don't have some materials available that they request. And so I know that some cities are working on alternatives, and I think maybe you all are too. But anyway, those are some discussions that we got to have. But we certainly would hope to get this completed and provide the city of Lebanon with one of the nicest subdivisions that is out here. So we've been pleased thus far, but it's taken longer than we anticipated when we started. So we would certainly appreciate your approval for an additional 5 years here and see if we can get this finished up in a proper manner. Okay.
Anyone on the board have questions for the applicant? Okay, I'll now open it up for the public hearing.
I have some
Name and
handouts.
Your name and address, please.
Melissa Gerard, I'm the entitlements manager for Four Star Group, which owns the Angeli Garden, well, we are the contract purchaser of the Angeli Gardens property to the south of this. And I have some handouts for you. I appreciate Commissioner Bashor's question because the relief requested tonight absolutely does negatively impact the Angeli Gardens project. Basically, and some of you know, I've been before these boards, we need to get a sanitary sewer line. I was involved in both projects. I mean, I was involved with the prior development when it was done 18 years ago. Originally, the lift station was anticipated to be on the Angeli Gardens site, but Mr. Tully got a little bit ahead of those developers, and so the lift station was moved to the north. The discharge point is in Chadwick, so we gave him, at no cost, a force main from the lift station on Auburn Meadows down to the Chadwick manhole kind of on Angeli Way. And that bisected our property. It's made it more difficult to develop, but we've designed around it. It's important to note force mains cannot be tapped. You cannot run connection lines off of force mains. Gravity sewers, on the other hand, can be tapped. And you can run connections off of those gravity sewers. Because the lift station was relocated, we have had to go back up instead of what should have been on the south. We've got to get a line, and that's what this exhibit is. We've had to go back up. This is proposed to be a gravity line. It can be tapped for all the houses that you can. This is basically the southwest or the southeast corner of Auburn Meadows, Section 4. All those lines can be tapped, and we're basically building it, or we would propose to build it for the developer of Auburn Meadows. It's a roughly, our estimate is about $209,000 to build this segment of gravity line up to the lift station. I originally contacted, probably more than a year ago, the elder Mr. Tully to talk to him about getting this easement because they don't have the plat recorded, so I'm kind of in a bind. We can't build it because we don't have the easement. He told me at that time to work with his engineer and exchange plans and work within their design for Auburn Meadows, and we would take it from there. So we got a hold of their plans from their engineer. That's what this is. The background is, these plans are already done. They are engineered already. They have designed these plans. It's not that they're waiting to design it. So we worked and we spent a lot of engineering time and money designing a system that would follow and track their easements that are already existing for their plat so that we wouldn't negatively impact any of their lots. A few months ago, it started getting a little critical for us, and I was pressing for a response on some documents that I had sent them for the easement that we needed privately, because once this plat is recorded, these will be public easements, and I'm not going anywhere that will not be a public easement when this is finally dedicated. But right now, since it's not, we need private easements. At that point, which was the first time I'd ever heard about it, the junior Mr. Tully told me that they would not be giving us an easement. They will build it for us for the cost, our expense of $200,000, which when we estimate our cost is $209,000, and they want us to pay $200,000 to build the line that goes through their property and serves their lots. That seemed a bit unfair. But the biggest criterion from our perspective is we cannot relinquish control over the timing of that critical piece of infrastructure to a competitor developer. We absolutely cannot, by the time this happens, or any problems that would occur with their construction of the line, we will have already closed on the property, spent millions of dollars there, but we will have also done heavy dirt work, which dwarfs the size of the land acquisition cost. So we will have millions of dollars into this before we would even determine that there is a problem. And as Mr. Tully suggested, there have been supply chain issues, although I would suggest that we have been more successful as a large national company sourcing product from other sources than perhaps a local developer. As you know, your ordinance provides that 18 months after the primary plat is filed, the secondary plat should be filed. But even if that means 18 or 12 months from the last secondary plat, we are way beyond the time. This subdivision has taken over 18 years. I have kids who have graduated from college and in that amount of time, or well, they've graduated from high school and gone to college. And we're not even half through at this point, a little over half, I guess. But there's about 40% of the lots remaining to be sold out there. So I don't even see any light at the end of the tunnel here. So the question is, what is your authority? What are your remedies? What could you possibly do tonight? This is a discretionary thing that they are asking you for, this extension. So you have options. You could reject what they're requesting and tell them to go ahead and file their plat. It's already engineered.
Ma'am, you have 3 minutes left.
Okay. They could file the plat. There is some expense to them of doing that because they would have to post performance bonds. There are two ways to construct a subdivision. You can either build it, and when it's done, record the plat, or you can record the plat and file performance bonds. But maybe if there was a little expense and a little interest clock running, maybe we'd be in a little bit more hurry to get things done. You can break it up into smaller pieces of the extension. Instead of the 5 years that they're asking for, give them 3 months, give them 6 months, something a lot less. I mean, there's no reason why they need 5 times the 12-month period that's stated in our ordinance. You can, and this is my personal preference, you can condition the approval on giving us the private easement. They are the ones that are interfering with our ability to access that public infrastructure up in Angeli Gardens. We can't get to it legally, but we will be able to get to it legally just as soon as they record the plat. So this isn't an instance where you have a piece of property that's never going to be developed and we're bisecting it. He intends to plat it. He intends to make these easements public. It's just a question of timing. Or you can, and that's what I would request that you do, is that you have the authority, he's asking for something discretionary on your part, to condition the approval on giving us the easement that we need to access that lift station. And then the other alternative is you can continue them for a while and ask them strongly to come talk to us about giving us that easement. I would note, to his credit, Mr. Krulik tried that in an email that he sent confirming receipt of the documents and the request of the Auburn Meadows developer. He suggested that they contact me and talk to us about this easement. I got no communication. Perhaps that request will have more force coming from the full commission. But I would suggest that we not grant the full relief that the developer is asking for just blindly, because it really is inhibiting other development, quality development in the city of Lebanon.
Time is up. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ben, you want to come back to anybody else who would like to speak in public? Okay, we'll have to close the public hearing now, okay? And now the applicant, you can speak.
I'm sorry, sir.
I said you can speak now, because I've closed the public hearing. This is, you get to talk again because you're the applicant. It's okay.
Go ahead and talk, sir.
Okay, I'm sorry. My hearing's horrible. I apologize to you
You're fine.
again with that. I understand Melissa's comments here. However, we employed the counsel of Michael Andreoli over in Zionsville that actually assisted us initially when we bought the property from Mr. Neese and when we've laid out the initial development and approvals and so forth. And to make sure that we had no legal liabilities and et cetera, and to how that this easement was going to affect Auburn Meadows. And we talked with Tim Beyer, who is our engineer on the project, and if the line is put in as is engineered, we didn't feel that we had any issues, but we didn't really want to have somebody else in our development out there working on it without, our control. And that was at the recommendation of council. And so I think it was more than fair that obviously we offered to put it in, have our contractors to put it in for actually less money than what Ms. Jard has indicated that it would cost them to put it in. So with that regards, we're certainly not interested in holding up any other development, et cetera, but we can't function here with a very short time fuse on a extension from the standpoint that with materials today and contractors, getting contractors in, it takes probably a year to get ready to have the contractors start work by the time, because once I get your extension tonight, I got to start working with Kevin and his staff is getting a plans approval, and then get our engineers to redraft these, the prints to the new standards and et cetera. So it's not a project that's going to get completed, in a year's time or even in 2 years' time. We probably will be able to get the construction work done maybe in 2 to 2.5 years at that point, but we could actually get the easement line put in a long time prior to that, with their approval, but they turned it down and did not want us to put it in at the cost that we offered to do so. So I would still appreciate the time element that we've requested here to get this finished up and provide Lebanon with a high-quality subdivision that we've done thus far. So, comment.
Okay, thank you. Ben, do you have anything else you'd like to comment on?
Maybe just questions for Mr. Shine and or Mr. Krulik as it relates to the options. Certainly, as I had suggested previously, platting and recording is a separate action than a primary plat. they've presented some options. I don't know procedurally what options we would have in terms of placing conditions on a primary plat extension related to an easement that typically would not be recorded as part of a primary plat action. It's usually a secondary plat action where easements get recorded. So maybe I just ask procedurally for you guys who have got a little bit more experience.
I'll defer to John on legal matters, but, I mean, in my experience, in engineering and development, it seems unlikely that to put that kind of a restriction on a primary plat. Yes, primary plats will often depict road and utility connections to adjoining properties, just as this one would. But typically, any infrastructure construction or easement dedications are only done at secondary platting or through the construction process. So it does seem unlikely to me that, or atypical, I guess I should say, that specific easement dedications are required as part of a primary plat process. That's been my experience over my career.
Yeah, and I would agree with that. I mean, to the extent that we need to undertake and looking at other situations, we can obviously, I can do it with our folks, talk with Kevin, you, Ben. If that's the desire of this commission, we can look at that. But I do agree with what Kevin said.
Hey, Ben, I got to ask a couple of things, and I guess I'm just stupid, but I don't understand. So is the development that has not started, Angelee Way, is it being held to a point of not being able to tap into the sewer to be able to actually start their construction? And if so, I guess I'm not understanding why that is an issue after 12 or 13 years. Why are we not, why is that not something that he should not be able to be forced to allow that to be done, or come up with some type of document or something to where we're not holding up other developments?
Yeah, so this is in a section of the development that hasn't been recorded yet, so the easement doesn't exist. There is an easement associated with the force main that runs along the east end of the property. So theoretically, I don't know what that looks like, they could go around and then up the east end of the property where there's already an easement. I think, Kevin, you had a discussion with Lebanon Utilities last week, and it's their understanding that there's an easement associated with the force main that they would have to do a little bit more research, but might be able to be used to get up to that lift station and kind of go out and around. So there may be, I don't know how feasible it is there, but there may be another option in terms of getting that lift station. But in terms of the route that Ms. Gerard had suggested, that kind of runs through a section of development that's not recorded yet. So we in the primary platting process, we need to make sure that the roads and rights-of-way and easements are properly shown, but we're not requiring them to record at that time. That happens at secondary platting stage.
So hypothetically, let's just say we go ahead and give Mr. Tully a 5-year extension. He literally could sit on it for 5 years and do nothing as far as platting or anything in the sense of being able to move development on.
Technically, yes, it's their property in terms of how they would decide to move forward with their own property and plat development.
Is there a way we could section it off so that the city can say, continue section first?
That would be a fairly unprecedented request. I'm not aware that anything
It's
historically
a little unprecedented from the time we've had to deal with this in the first place, because it was Lebanon's issue that caused, it was Lebanon's decision that caused this in the first place, was it not? Because of where we ended up putting that.
Well, no matter where it was put, it was going to have, the neighboring property was going to have to get easements through wherever it was put. So if it was put to the south, the property to the north would need an easement. So somebody was going to need an easement no matter where it was put.
Right, but even in looking at it, it looks like it would have been better off sitting in the southeast section. Knew that there was going to be another development where Angelia Gardens is now than in the middle of his on the corner.
Possibly, yeah. I don't know the thought process on terms of that exact location. Certainly, also, you have to remember that the way the Lebanon Utilities accesses that site is from the north on 300 North. So the further south you go, then the further they have to go to get to it as well, because there's no road out there.
Road's gonna be there eventually.
Yeah, eventually there'll be a road, but there's not one now, so.
Is that basically where they're saying that easement area is? Basically, it's just east of,
So yeah, the force main from the lift station goes due south along the property line,
Okay.
and then it cuts to the west along the Angeli Garden site, and then to the south through Angeli Garden site to the lift, to the manhole that's just in the kind of the northwest part of Chadwick. So that force main actually does run through the Angeli Gardens property. So
Any other questions?
as she had mentioned, you could also choose to give them a shorter extension of time to record the next section. You don't have to give them 5 years. That's just what they requested. So if you want to try to speed up the process for the next section, you don't have to give them 5 years.
well, they won't have to do this until the secondary plat comes in. They don't have to actually give us kind of this, if we did the 5-year, they can just do sections by sections by sections.
Correct. They
As
could choose to do multiple sections over a 5-year period.
And not record it for 5
And not record it for 5 years, though. They don't have to record it until they're done.
Correct. And that's typically how it's done, because you avoid paying the performance bond costs. You end up just completing the construction, recording the plat, and doing maintenance bonds. So you do avoid those by doing that. And that's how most of our recent developments have done it. They've completed construction, then recorded that secondary plat.
Ben, I know you're in a UDO update as we speak. Has there been any conversation or discussion, any vision on how this provision in the subdivision control procedure would change?
We haven't got to that level of review yet, just kind of thinking out loud about it, though, just the typical process. They'll complete construction on a first section, then record a plat. That typically happens within 12 months, but not always. So it'd almost seem like that 12 or 18 months would be appropriate for that first section to be recorded. And I think we just need to clarify then what that means, because I don't know that it means that we expect every section to be recorded within the first 12 months. There's got to be some sort of process that allows for them to do further sections down the road. So I don't know whether it's just that you have to record the first section within 12 or 18 months, and then we need some sort of discussion what that means for future sections. And certainly, again, remember, the primary plat is different from construction drawings, and secondary plats, so we will always have construction drawings and secondary plats that meet the standards at the time, even if it's 5 years after the primary plat's approved.
Has anything been recorded? Has any of the primary plats at this point been recorded?
Yeah, there are 3 sections that have been recorded. And if they, actually, I'll have to wake my computer back up again so we can.
Where everything was in white, correct?
Yeah, if they want to pull the screen back up, everything that's in white has been recorded. So you've got kind of this tan color that wraps around the kind of the northeast and southeast perimeter that has yet to be recorded.
Can you show me, Ben, please, where
So
the
that-
Angeli Gardens is supposedly supposed to tap in and
So-
where?
Yep. So there's a sanitary line and a manhole that's going to be placed somewhere at where this stub street is to the south, and then it would follow the route of this road up to the lift station. That force main right now, that lift station, the force main comes due south, and then it makes a right-hand turn and comes to the west here. So it's our understanding through Lebanon Utilities, there is an easement along that eastern property line for the force main, but the route that they're looking to take kind of follows the line of this road that's yet to be constructed.
And is that along the creek area? Am I correct in saying that that is along the creek area where you're talking about the line, the main line that you were just referring to?
I don't think it comes that far south.
No, I think it runs across the north end of Angeli Gardens and then
Yeah.
Okay.
crosses Angeli Gardens roughly where Grant Boulevard is.
If you know where Grant Boulevard is, where supposedly they always, and I literally grew up there on Elm Swamp, so I mean, I can look back and remember when they were putting this in. They put that kind of cutout there because at some day we were going to build houses out that way. Is that not an easement there?
So there is a manhole there and a right-of-way for that road to the south. The challenge there is that manhole, my understanding, is not deep enough to serve that entire Angeli Garden site with gravity sewer. So you have to go north to go back south, basically, because it can't be served just directly to that manhole.
So they have to go the other way so that it can drain down
To that manhole, essentially.
And I think it's so shallow, it's a very small number of lots it could possibly serve.
Right.
So effectively, they've got to take all their sewage to the north.
And
via
bring it back
gravity
down. Yeah.
To the lift station that's in Auburn Meadows, and then that lift station pumps back to that manhole that is essentially on the southern line of Angeli Gardens.
Possible to run it that way.
I don't know, that is one question that came up in sort of just anecdotal conversation. If there is an easement that the force main exists within, you could possibly, if it was constructible, feasible to construct it, you could possibly construct your gravity line within an existing easement. Keep in mind, I say, is it constructionally feasible? I don't know how much easement is there, if it was ever even recorded. It would have had to be recorded across the Angeli Gardens property, or at least it should have been. But they wouldn't have necessarily had to record an easement across their own property. But if it does exist, you could construct within that easement, because it would be a public easement. But say that easement is 15 feet wide and the force main is buried 5 foot deep in the center of it, and you're going to put a 25 feet deep sewer also in that easement while maintaining the force main function, while not getting outside of the easement if you didn't have permission. Feasibility is a question, whether or not that could be done.
Well, and I guess my whole point, I didn't honestly know that there was an issue in the other development being able to hook in, but I guess as a personal issue on my end is, I think, to start with, I think that Auburn Meadows has had plenty of time to do what needs to be done. I have done work out there. Not going to go into it, but there are issues. I don't feel like I can sit here as a person and vote in a positive way, knowing that it's almost, to me, or at least it's being presented to me, is that there is someone holding the winning lottery ticket up here while the other is down here, and they're not able to get the same, being taken care of the same, I guess. It just, to me, it seems like it's just not fair. And, I don't know what happened 12 years ago, 14 years ago. It doesn't make any difference in my book, but I just have a really, really hard time thinking that an extra 5 years is going to make a difference at this point. So if this was something that, it seems like to me, if it was two developments working together, different story. But it seems to me that both of them are, so I'm going to, on my end, I'm going to, make a motion that we leave it at the 12 months.
I second that.
I didn't hear the.
But before you take a vote, I have a question for Kevin again.
Sure.
The applicant has indicated that they're concerned about a third-party constructing sanitary sewer through their development, not having control. Is that atypical to have a third party constructing that? I mean, obviously, it's a timing thing. And I guess what would be the concern, because the city would be inspecting that construction, whether they were building it or whether the third party was building it. So I'm not sure what the concern is on that.
Yeah, I don't see a whole lot of concern there from either party. And certainly, agreements can be put in place to control that sewer construction and what's allowed to happen there. And we certainly, as a city, see plenty of off-site utility construction on our own projects. We see it on private development projects. Those are typically governed by some sort of a easement agreement, in addition to the easement that dedicates land for such a use. So, I mean, there's always a possibility to work through those concerns. Seems fairly common that developers or cities and developers or developers and private property owners have a need to construct off-site sewers. So I guess in my world, that's easily controlled and easily addressed, the concerns that are associated with that. But again, private property rights being what they are, I don't know that the city is in a position to force anyone into that agreement or that easement outside of a platting process that's controlled by the subdivision ordinance, or the Unified Development Ordinance, excuse me.
Maybe, and certainly you can vote on the motion and second that's already here, but maybe a suggestion would be is to continue this to next month to give the...
Now, let me ask you a question. I think that if we could just postpone this, put a motion withdrawn, and then have them come back in a month.
I would be willing to do that if we can get some type of idea of
Right.
where we can come together and actually get maybe the easement, or if you're saying, Kevin, the utilities is looking into actually where that easement is, if we could possibly get some of that information within the next 30 days before the next meeting and be able to make a better...
I mean, yeah, any easement to build that sewer, a sewer that's going to be dedicated publicly, would need to fall under the purview of Lebanon Utilities and the City of Lebanon. We'd want to review that, in addition to whatever agreements are in place between property owners. But yes, if that's a public sewer that's planned to be dedicated publicly, the city would be involved in reviewing the design and reviewing and inspecting the construction.
So I think maybe, and to follow Mr. Campbell with your statement, what I was proposing is continue this to next month, give the two parties an opportunity to negotiate an outcome. What I'd like to see is they have the ability to negotiate that outcome. Ideally, Four-Star is able to secure that easement, construct that on their timeline that they need for their development, and hopefully they can work out the details and what that entails. I certainly understand the applicant's concern about losing control, but I don't know that they actually lose control necessarily other than on the timing, because it'd be on Four-Star's timing to develop that sanitary sewer. But certainly the city is going to have oversight in terms of making sure the plans are developed according to our construction standards. It's constructed according to those plans and meets all the applicable standards. So it's not something where they have to be concerned about something not meeting the standards that gets constructed. So that's maybe what I would like to see, is continue this a month, give them an opportunity to work through the details of that arrangement and come back, and hopefully they've got something solved within the next 30 days.
I got two questions. John, I want you to clarify your motion you made. You said leave it at 12 months. Is that per the original ordinance effectively denying an extension? Or are you saying give a 12-month extension?
12 months.
And the second question, I guess, for the commission and maybe Mr. Shine here, is there's been a motion, a second. We can still continue this, or do we need to have a vote?
You could withdraw your motion if you choose, and then another motion could be made to continue.
Okay.
I'll go ahead and withdraw my motion and make a motion that we take another look at it at next meeting.
So it'd be a motion to continue to the
Continue to, yes.
August meeting.
Yes.
I could second that.
You have a second, okay? That sounds like the most reasonable thing to me at this point. I think we were going nowhere. I don't think anybody would have come out a winner. And I think this way you guys can figure it out, and Ben, you and Kevin, and the people get together with them, and so if we can figure out, because you got to have the easements to ever do anything, so.
We need to record
We
a
would
vote.
like, you have a motion and a second, so we're ready to take a roll call.
John Lashley,
Yes.
Dan Bashore.
Yes.
Kevin Krulig. Yes. Keith Campbell.
Yes,
Brian Tandy,
Yes.
Ashley Paddock,
Yes.
Ally Mullen,
Yes.
Lori Gross.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
And I would just add, I know Mr. Tully had concerns about material availability.
Right.
It is a real concern right now. It's a fact of life in the construction industry. I can tell you, we have made concessions in material standards based on those market forces that are at play right now. So let's talk about that. We are willing to, we are sympathetic to those concerns, and myself and Lebanon Utilities and their engineers are willing to hear those concerns and make some reasonable concessions where we need to.
Okay, so that'll be on August 15th is the next meeting. Okay? So, is any other business coming on, Ben?
Not for me. Nothing for
I would
me.
motion to adjourn.
I'll second.
Okay. We have a motion to adjourn in a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. We're adjourned. Thank you.